TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
Hey there, welcome to the show today. It's Friday. Today's date is 6/21, so it's the 21st of June. And we're starting to get there. I mean, we're getting through summer a little bit anyway. Well, I guess yesterday was the first day of summer, so maybe we're just starting summer. I don't know. I'm getting old. So as things get along here, I think that, Major League Baseball is one of those things where, there's spots and different things that come up. And hopefully everybody had a good day yesterday. And we'll look at what we can kind of track down today. I'm going to try to keep track of time just a little bit better today, because there's a couple games that start at 6:40. And I think I was going to do one, the last time I did a show, and the game already started. So I wanted to make sure that I hit into that and not mess around too much with some of this other stuff that I have to talk about. But one of the things that I think is important to talk about in how you look at Major League Baseball and when you bet Major League Baseball is, and I say this a lot, is when you're betting, what is your risk averseness? So what does that mean? That means that if you are one of those guys that go out and you want a sure thing, and you want everything to line up before you make a bet, then you have a risk averse low category. If you're one of those guys that kind of like, I'm just going to bet on a whim, and I'm going to make sure that, I'm going to make this wager, and I think that I'm going to have fun with it. Maybe I'm not going to wager a full unit on it, but I'm just going to make one of these bets, then you're a risk averse high. So you're not worried about certain things that come along the way that matter in regards to whether you have a good bet or whether you don't. One of the things I always advise is to make sure you're convicted when you go to the window, meaning that if you push the button on your app on your phone, if you take the money out of your pocket and walk up to the betting window, that you're making a wager that you expect to win. If you are just throwing it kind of against the wall and you don't expect to win, you're kind of like, okay, well, maybe we'll win this one, then don't make it, because there's plenty of other ones to make bets on that you might feel better about. So don't make that one. Make the ones that you feel a lot better about. So the reason I bring this up is because a lot of times people, sit there and they want to make wagers, and they want to bet, if there's a number out there and it's minus, I don't know, we'll just say it's minus 180, and you want to play the underdog side, and you want to bet it at 160 or whatever the number you get is. I would advise this: know what you're doing. I don't ever play those, by the way, but the reason that I tell you that it's important to understand is because at minus 180, just at that number, the implied probability is 64.30% of the time that's going to win. So that means 35% of the time it's going to lose. Now, if you make that wager 1,000 times, you're probably going to come out where that 35% is going to come in, and you're probably going to be okay. But I don't know that that's kind of what you do, right? So most people don't make that wager where they do it every single time, every time it's available. They don't go make that bet. And because they don't go make that bet, that alters the outcome. And because it alters the outcome and it alters the predictability of how often that hits and doesn't hit, a lot of times when you take these long, big underdogs, you don't fare too well. And it's because you don't play them every single solitary time. Now, if you do that, that's a whole different story. So if you're one of those guys that are out there playing that game and you're playing the plus 160, the plus 180, the plus 200, the plus 250, and you do it every single solitary time it's out there, no matter what the game is, and you do it, you're going to be okay. Because ideally the numbers are going to shake out to where you want it to be. But in a shorter term, most people don't do it that way. Most people want to take that, I'm going to bet $50 and get this lick and double my money, and they lose, and then they go, well, how did that happen? Well, the reality is that, it takes a lot for that to not happen in your way and your outcome. So I would advise that. I would say the first thing to do is try to come up with some kind of threshold. Most of my bets are minus 140 or less, minus 145 or less, and the underdog side of that. I don't look for big favorites. I don't look for big underdogs. I look for value in the number, and compared to what my number is, and or what the betting market is kind of dictated to, and I try to stay within that framework. Secondly, when you do this for a long time and you've been betting for ages, it seems like, you turn gray and a lot of stuff happens. And as that goes on, you gain experience. So my numbers come up, and I have what I call Webby odds. And Webby odds are not something I make up. Webby odds are derived from Joe Pita. Joe Pita wrote a book called Trading Bases years ago. And I thought it was a great way to start to analyze how to make a number. And basically what it is he's a former guy that traded stocks and bonds on the market, had access to calculators and comparison screens and different things for stocks. And then he related that to sports betting. And then through the sports betting, he created a formula that you can use where if you have a team that's, I don't know, let's just say their win percentage is 500 and another team win percentage is, we'll just say it's 450, just for whatever. And those two teams play each other. Well, what's the win percentage for that game? How many times should a team that has a better winning percentage, for example, in that particular spot, win that game? And there's a formula for that. So I captured that formula out of there. And then what I do is a lot of different things where my numbers are based on that formula, but how I get them, it's based off of projected numbers. So I look at things that Fangraphs does. I look at things that Baseball Prospectus does, and then I influence that through base runs. And it comes out with a winning percentage for these teams for the season. That gets updated every day, and it gets adjusted every single day. So they're fresh every day, brand new. And then I adjust them also based on the pitchers that are involved. So when I tell you I make my own number, and it's called Webby odds, it's not something I make up. It's something that I run a process through, and it's created. And then that created number helps me to understand where the value is in the numbers. And I tell you all of this because you have to then vet that. So if you just took Webby odds, for example, today, and you looked at these numbers that it throws out, and I love Friday because my opinion is sports books, on Friday, they have to get new matchups. And new matchups, they don't figure them out real well. They're wrong a lot of times. And a lot of times you can pick these spots off and you can hammer them and be real aggressive, and you can make money on Friday. So this is one of my favorite days to bet. Monday is another day where the same thing happens. So Webby odds said, hey, look, Chicago Cubs, New York Mets today. Chicago Cubs, the line should be minus 164. The line went off at like 145. So that says, hey, look, the Cubs have some value. As a matter of fact, they have 5.46% value. You should bet that. And that's a number where I would normally bet. And I come back and then my experience says, hey, look, there's a problem here. And here's the problem. The problem is this is the reason that it's the way it is because of Imanaga, and Imanaga is facing who's he pitching? He's facing Quintana today, and the reality is that my experience said, well, this is the second time that the Mets have seen Imanaga. The first time you can kind of understand, well, this is where the problem blends into. They've never seen him before, and he's a good pitcher. Well, the second time they see him, they go through and they hit 3 home runs in the first 2 innings, and they score, I think, 11 runs in this game off of Imanaga. And you know, my experience in being able to vet that number was one of the things I think that is a value to when you bet baseball. Because if you just go out there and you just read numbers and you just play numbers, I think you run into these kind of problems. So I found a couple spots like that today, and Monaga is the first one. So I saved myself money by not betting that game, and that's almost like winning a bet in itself. So I feel pretty good about that. Second thing is, I looked at Webby Odds says, hey, go look at the Detroit game today, and Detroit plays the White Sox. That number is like minus 175 for Detroit, and it's Flaherty. I think he's pitching against Fetty today. And my number, Webby Odds, comes back and says it should be 190. Well, the number is 175. Well, that gives me a 3% edge. Well, that's a bettable edge. That's a bettable number. And then I started looking at it, and I started breaking it down, and I started looking at the pitchers and how good they are. And Fetty's been really good. It turns into more of a coin flip than it is a minus 170 or what my number says, minus 190. So I didn't play that game either because if it's a coin flip, I expect the line to be more of a coin flip. And it's not a coin flip line. This is a big number, minus 170, minus 175, whatever that number that you're looking at is. So what I'm trying to do is give you an exercise in just kind of how things work in baseball. You look at things, you kind of look at it from a perspective of, man, that's what I should be doing. I should be doing all of these things when it comes to the number, and just bet that number blindly, but you don't. You vet it out first. Here's another one. So Tampa Bay and Pepio plays Pittsburgh today, and my number in that game is actually Pittsburgh minus 101, and the number is Tampa Bay minus 130. And there's steam on this game. So I wrote that down as something to really talk about, because a lot of people like to go follow the steam. And one of the things is Pepio is a pretty good pitcher. People like Pepio. But what they don't really look at is, how do you make a line? How do you do a number when the Pittsburgh Pirates today start with an opener? You know, they've got a guy who's going to pitch today. He's going to pitch 1 inning, maybe 2 at the most. And then they're going to bring in a guy named Ortiz. And Ortiz is going to pitch 4 or 5 innings. They do what the Rays typically do. I mean, that's how this all started. So what you want to do when you look at a game like this is you got to see where the value comes into from the pitching part of it. And what I found is that all these people that are jumping on the Tampa Bay Rays, they're jumping on them because they played Minnesota pretty good. Maybe they're starting to turn things around. Their offense is starting to hit a little bit. Rosarena is doing pretty well, and that's part of what their problem has been. Rosarena is batting under 200 for the season, so they need him to really start carrying a load. He's their superstar, right? He's their all-star. He's the guy that's supposed to hit a bunch of home runs, and he hasn't been that guy. So when you start to think about this game and where the number is, because it's not necessarily a high number, the number I think is up to like 130 for Tampa Bay, but I think that's misleading, and I think it's misleading because Pepio is a guy that if you look at his WPA, and I talk about this number a lot, winning percentage added, it's a negative. So over his last 30 days, he has made more mistake pitches than he has positive pitches. And those pitches have been hit. Pepio hasn't been the greatest pitcher in the world. I've backed Pepio earlier in the season, but I wouldn't back him now. His number right now for Pepio is minus 47, minus 0.47. So he's in the worst 25% of all Major League Baseball pitchers in making mistakes. And what happens when pitchers make mistakes? Hitters hit them. And it doesn't matter if they're the Pittsburgh Pirates or they're the New York Yankees. Pitches that are mistakes go for doubles, triples. They go for home runs. They go for they get hit. So I don't like that. And his hard hit rate is high. It's 36%. So when you start to think about, do I support and back Steam or do I not? Well, you got to vet it. And this is what I mean by vetting. You got to look at it a little bit deeper and understand where things go. So there's a lot of people out there saying, hey, go bet Tampa Bay today. I would tell you that your better solution is to bet Pittsburgh. I'm not telling you that that's a play, but it's a better solution than following the steam in this particular spot. There's one more that I wanted to hit on before I jump into these games, because there's 640 games and I want to make sure I get them. But Pittsburgh, the Boston Red Sox today, right? Boston Red Sox playing the Cincinnati Reds. This is Cutter Crawford against Abbott. And when it comes to stuff, there's no difference. There's no, shouldn't say difference. There's no question. Cutter Crawford has good stuff. He has better stuff than Abbott does. The problem is of all the pitchers that pitched in, there's 14 games. There's 28 pitchers out there. Of all those 28 pitchers, the guy who makes the most mistakes, Cutter Crawford, minus 107 on WPA. His home run rate is 2.22. Anytime you're over 1, that's not good. And he's over 2. So that's a problem in itself. And then you want to try to go and tell me that he's worth supporting. You don't want to back a guy that makes that many mistakes and gives up the runs. And here's why. If you look at really what he is, and I know that you can look at his sabermetric numbers and you can look at all these other things, and his sabermetric numbers show that he is where is he? There he is. He's 3.77 xFIP, 3.48 SIERA, good numbers, average numbers, not bad. But those mistakes, he's made 15 starts so far for the Boston Red Sox, 15. In those 15 starts, the Boston Red Sox are 4-11. So if you're betting, you're not betting on Cutter Crawford. You're betting on him to win that game. And you know, if he's 4-11, you're losing a ton of times. You're not winning. But that's why. You're losing because he makes mistakes. The other team capitalizes. They can't overcome it with their offense, even though it's good. And you run into the problem. So those are what I mean by vetting those things. And when I say a lot of times, you know, I make fun of myself because I'm, 57 years old and I'm gray and all that stuff. But the reality is experience means something and has value. And in this particular case, you want to try to make sure that you use your experience to your advantage. And I want to make sure that those are said so that, people can kind of understand. Now, I want to hit these two games real quick before I go into something else. I wanted to talk about the Phillies today, and I'm going to tell you that I think they're worth a play. Phillies are minus 135. My number on the game for the Phillies is Phillies are, where'd they go? They're there. I got them at minus 148. So that's 4% value. You should bet that. And when you're betting 4% value, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That tells you that, when you hear people say EV positive, that's what we're talking about right now. This is extra value positive, 4.1%, meaning that you have an expected return of, if you made this bet 1,000 times, you would win 4% more by betting it on the Phillies than you would if you bet it the other way. And that's what we're talking about. So that's a very good bet. Anytime you can get a bet like that, Anywhere, I would tell you, anytime you're 3% to 7%, 8%, those are good windows. Anytime you get to 10, 11, 15%, there might be something wrong with your number. You might want to double check that first, vet it out. And if it still works out, then it still works out. You bet it. But that was a good number for me. I think it's a good bet. And to break that game down, first thing that I looked at here, I got to get to the right screen. I already told you what my number said. And then when I looked at, it's Montgomery for the Diamondbacks. And well, let me just hit you with the other game real quick. It's the White Sox Tigers under 7.5, and I'll get to that in a minute. But under 7.5, minus 115, and Phillies minus 135. That gets you the time frame to get in there. Now let's break them down. So the Phillies game, you're looking at Montgomery. Montgomery is 7-4 in his 11 starts, and Walker's 4-5 in his 9 starts. But where I'm looking at this as a good advantage for Philadelphia is 18% better offensively against left-handed pitching. The Diamondbacks hit left-handed pitchers better, but this is a right-handed pitcher. They're only 1% better. And SOPS Plus tells me how a pitcher handles the on-base percentage and slugging percentage against the opponent. And Montgomery, over his last 28 days, is 175. He's 75% worse than an average pitcher. So he's facing the Phillies. The Phillies can hit. So I expect the Phillies to be able to dominate on them offensively. And I know Walker's been bad. But at the same time, I tell you, Walker's been bad. How bad is he? Well, let's look. He's a 105. That means he's 5% worse than an average pitcher. It's kind of right around that average number. So he's not nearly as bad as you might have thought he was. His original number for the season is 131. So he's getting better, actually. And then when I broke down the pitching numbers and kind of looked at them, Montgomery, his metrics, and when I say metrics, that's like his XFIP and FIP numbers and Sierra numbers. So the numbers you look at to kind of quantify sabermetrically whether you have a good pitcher or not. He's in the worst 25% of all baseball. 4.73 XFIP, 4.76 Sierra. Walker's in an average number, even though it's high. It's still average. So you've got an edge there on the mound. Mistakes-wise, they both make mistakes, but Montgomery makes more. Hard hit-wise, they're about the same. When it comes to the other thing I thought was important here is whip. If you don't handicap your games and look at whip, that's a mistake. Whip is walks plus hits divided by innings pitched. And the goal is to keep guys off base. So anything under 1 is going to be very good. Anything that's 1 to say 1.25 is kind of average. Anything above that's bad. And Montgomery is a 2. So I talk about this a lot because what offenses try to do today is get a guy on base, maybe 2 guys on base, and then hit a home run. They're not trying to string a whole bunch of hits together to score that one. It's too hard. It takes a lot of effort to score that one run. So they want to score 2 or 3 runs at a time. And if you can get 2 guys on base and then hit a home run, man, you got more power coming. And I think the Phillies can do that. So I like the Phillies today. Phillies at minus 135 or less, I think is a great play. The other one that I mentioned was Fetty and Flaherty. Both pitchers don't make mistakes. They're in the top 25% of pitchers that are not making mistakes. They're throwing the pitches much better than error pitches. So that means they're making pitches. They're getting outs. So then you look at it and you go, okay, well, I just talked about whip rate, right? Well, Flaherty is a 0.7. He's not allowing 1 guy on base per inning. So it's going to be hard to score a bunch of runs that way. And Fetty's a 1.33. So neither one of them are bad, and neither one of them give up home runs. The other thing is neither one of them walk anybody, and they got high strikeout rates. So then you kind of flip that over and go, well, that's pretty good. What do the offenses do? Can the offenses do anything against that? Well, The White Sox offense ranks 23rd right now, and the Tigers offense ranks 27th. There's only 30 teams, so these two teams are almost in the bottom 5 of all of them. They're not doing well. When it comes to weighted runs created plus, they're minus 12% for the White Sox, minus 25% for the Tigers. And when it's an ISO rate, so isolated power, so extra base hits, doubles, triples, home runs, that kind of stuff, you got the two worst teams in baseball. The White Sox are 29th. The Tigers are 30th. And that's how teams want to score runs. So these two pitchers can control that. So under 7.5, I think, is a good number. Earlier in the day, it opened at 8. So if you could have got it at 8, it would have been a much better play. But at 7.5, it's still good. I think that's a way to go. So those are two plays I think that you should play. And I wanted to hit you with another play, and then talk a little bit, because I had a question earlier that came through Twitter. So I wanted that they asked me to talk about the Milwaukee Brewers. So we'll do that. But I wanted to talk about the run line, and I'm not afraid of the run line. I don't want you to be afraid of the run line, and I want you to understand how it's correlated. The run line is not correlated to the money line. So your money line is a understanding of who's going to win the game. Your run line is correlated to the total, and it's correlated in such a way that says, hey, this team's going to win based on the number of runs that are supposed to be scored in the game. So if you don't break your game down and have a score predictor or some kind of way to understand what the score should be based off of the performance of the pitchers and the offenses and stuff, it's going to be hard to bet the run line. But if you have a way to do it, then you run into good spots here. And one of the good spots I think that you want to bet tonight is the Seattle Mariners and George Kirby. So part of understanding how to make a bet on the run line is two things. One, the team you're betting on to cover the number or not. Sometimes you're taking the runs, but in this case, I'm covering a number. This is minus 1.5. You have two things. Your offense needs to score or have a way to score, and your pitcher needs to be able to hold the other team down. So when you look at it from that perspective here, and we'll start with the pitchers, when you start with Kirby's in the top 25% of all pitchers in metrics. So that means his xFIP, his FIP, his Sierra numbers are all in the best 25% of all of Major League Baseball. You want a guy that's not going to put guys on base, and he don't walk anybody. I mean, his walk rate's really good, 1.2. He doesn't allow home runs. His strikeout rate's high. It's not top 25%, but it's 9. He strikes out 9 guys per game, or 9 innings. So that's a high rate. And then when you look at it from a different number, he doesn't make mistakes. His WPA is high, top 25% of all baseball, and his soft contact rate is high. So he's not giving up solid contact either. So we like that. Then you flip it to the other side and go, well, Rogers, right? Rogers is in the top 25% worst pitchers in Sierra, xFIP, all the metrics. He makes mistakes. His mistake rate is high. He also allows 4 walks per game, so he puts guys on base. So you have an opportunity here to capitalize on his errors and putting guys on base. And then we look at it and go, okay, well, where's the offenses at? Well, currently, Seattle is 14th, middle of the pack, but they're 8th in ISO, so that's good. And they're 17% better against left-handed pitching against the regular offense, so that's really good. And then Miami, they are 28th in offense, 24th in ISO, minus 28% on offense. And I like the idea that Kirby can control that number, maybe holds them to 2 runs. And then you go, okay, well, that means I only got to score 4. And my score predictor comes out and says, well, the number that it's over there, there it is. I've got 4.5 runs that they can score at a minimum. So I like the idea that we're going to get 4.5, 5 runs, and we're going to cover that spread, and we're going to make that number. So I think that's a good play. So the 3 plays tonight were Philadelphia minus the 135, White Sox, Tigers under 7.5, and Kirby on the run line minus 1.5. Now, I wanted to hit you with 2 other things. One is the Nationals, and they're playing very well, but they have a kid pitching for them. His name's DJ Hers, and there's some steam coming in on him. And they play the Rockies, and I get it. The Rockies are one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, but this is not a spot where you want to follow the steam. You don't want to follow Nationals. You don't want to be betting Nationals. If anything, you want to bet Colorado tonight. And here's why. So there's a thing about a pitcher when they go out and they set a high mark, a mark that they've never achieved before. And Hers made 3 starts. And in his starts, his game score in those starts for Hers, his first start was a 30, which is kind of average, and it's way below average, but it's kind of normal for a guy making his first start. His next start was a 50, so that's an average number. And then he's got an outlier that's an 80, 86 his last time out. That's his best start he's ever had. So of those 3 starts, which start do you think he's going to do? You think he's going to do an 86? Think he's going to do a 30, or do you think he's going to do a 50? Well, he's probably going to be closer to 50 than he is anything else, and 50 is average. That's not a good day. That's an average day. And an average day versus an offense right now where Colorado comes in, and Colorado is 3rd in ISO. They just played the Dodgers, and they scored lots of runs against the Dodgers. And the Dodgers pitching. This kid's not going to pitch like the Dodgers do, and they're 13th in total offense. So this is one of those spots where I think you have to understand Major League Baseball and how it works. If you're a pitcher and you're off of your very best start you've ever had, you're not going to do that again. Kudos to you for having a great start the last time. So as a bettor, you should have been on him the last time, not this time. So we want to make sure that we understand that as we go forward and kind of wrap that into understanding how baseball betting works, right? I think the last time we talked about, betting against Cease because Cease wasn't as good as he has been. Well, they play the Brewers tonight, and I would tell you to bet against him again tonight. Cease is, and until these guys turn things around, right, Cease is making all kinds of mistakes. He is minus 0.60 on the WPA number. So win percentage added, he's not adding. He's taking away. He's taking away from his team's ability to win the game because he's making mistakes. And his home run rate is 1.95 per 9 innings. That's not a good number. So can Milwaukee hit home runs? Absolutely they can. So that's a bad spot, right? And if you look at it from a situational perspective, Cease has made 15 starts. If you're really that good, you should win 2/3 of those games. He's 8-7. He's not 10-5. He's 8-7. So I think that this is another spot where he's overvalued, and you can get a lot of value from Colin Ray. Nobody knows Colin Ray, and if you throw him out there and you look at him and watch him pitch, you sit there and you go, "Oh my God, I could go hit Colin Ray." Well, he's made where is he? There, Colin Ray. He's made 12 starts for the Brewers, and he's been a bulk starter too. But in those 12 actual starts, they've won 9 times. He's 75% win rate. He's 9-3 in those starts. So you've got to give players like that value because they know what they're doing. And you sit there and you go, well, how is it possible? How is it possible that a guy like Colin Ray can make that happen? And the reason I tell you this, and nobody's watching this number, is win percent added means a ton. So he's at 0.41 positive. He's adding value to the percentage of his team's chance to win the game because he's throwing pitches where they need to go, and the results turn into positive results. And Cease is making mistakes. So I think that's where you kind of look at this and you go, oh my God, I can see now how guys that don't throw as hard, that don't have great stuff, win. And it's because WPA puts it right on the screen and says, look at these guys, bet on these guys, bet against the guys that are bad, right? So in lieu of that today, Montgomery for Arizona is not good. You've got Pepio, not good, making mistakes. You've got Carrasco making mistakes. Crawford making the most mistakes. Singer for Kansas City making mistakes. Cease making mistakes. Paddock and Estes, they play each other tonight. They're both making mistakes. And Sandoval makes mistakes. And when I say makes mistakes, they make more mistakes than they do quality pitches. So so that's what I mean by that. And then on the vice versa of that, if you want to look for the guys that make the good pitches, it's Fetty, Flaherty, it's Rodon, it's Kirby, and it's Rodriguez for Baltimore, Hudson for Colorado, and Colin Ray. It's amazing how some of this stuff works for Major League Baseball. So I just wanted to hit you with that idea so that you kind of got the concept that WPA is almost everything in Major League Baseball, and nobody follows that number. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the Brewers because I was asked to on Twitter. So my numbers when I look at the Brewers and when I have their ranking and their power ranking and so forth, I've got them at winning 87 games, at 537 winning percentage right now, winning the National League Central. The closest other team is the Cubs at 81. I've got the Cardinals at 80.5, the Reds 77.5, the Pirates at 75.5. So I've got Milwaukee in a pretty good spot here. Now, having said that, what makes Milwaukee special? What makes Milwaukee good? Well, what makes them good is 1 through 9, they have a bunch of guys that can hit, and they produce. So they've got William Contreras, the catcher, and the catcher is their MVP right now. He drives in runs, and he's very important. And I think that one of the biggest misnomers in Major League Baseball today, and guys like me that go out and do a lot of sabermetric stuff, they miss the understanding of how important an RBI guy is. Guys that drive in runs are extremely important because they got them or they don't. You got guys that are going to drive in 100 runs, or you don't have guys that are going to drive in 100 runs. And that's a difference sometimes in teams being able to score and teams being able to win and make playoffs or not. And the Brewers have a guy in that. And Yelich being able to do what Yelich has done has been phenomenal. Now, they've got some younger talent on that team too. Churio's been pretty good. I would like to see Churio do a little bit more about getting on base. Strikes out a lot, and he's a home run kind of guy, and he really needs to be an on-base guy and steal. But they've been doing a lot of that. Terang has been stealing a lot of bases. He's batting over 300. So you get some depth with that team. Perkins has been kind of a guy that's been hit or miss, but more hit than he has been miss. And interestingly enough, they got Rhys Hoskins over from the Phillies, and he really hasn't been a guy that's done a whole lot for them. And if he gets hot, he's a guy that can help. And what I mean by help is, your catcher Contreras needs some help in driving in runs, and that's what Rhys Hoskins needs to be doing. He needs to be driving in a lot of runs. So it's an interesting team where I run into problems with Milwaukee. They have totally surprised me on offense. Where I'm going to run into problems is their pitching. Their bullpen has been way better than I thought it was going to be, and they haven't even had their closer, Williams. So when he comes back and he can pitch, I think they'll get better in the bullpen. But their starting staff doesn't match up to anybody, and that's a problem. So you might be good enough to win this division, and the guy that asked me to talk to him because I think he's a fan for Milwaukee, might maybe not like this idea, but your best pitcher is Peralta. But Peralta's a number 2. He's not a number 1. Peralta's not an ace. Peralta doesn't match up when he has to go face Wheeler. He doesn't match up when he has to face the best pitchers in baseball. He's an underdog, and that's a problem. But when he's a number 2, he can match up okay. So first of all, you got a problem there. But then you run into who's your 3, who's your 4, who's your 5. And they've got a bunch of guys injured. Their problems, their biggest issue is going to be, how does it look? And I'm going to pull up a thing real quick. But how does it look when this team has to make the playoffs, and you need 3 guys that are going to go down there and shut an opponent down? I don't think it's going to look very good, because you have their pitching staff as it stands right now is Freddie Peralta, number 1. Number 2 is Bryce Wilson. Number 3 is Colin Ray. Number 4 is Carlos Rodriguez. And number 5 is Tobias Myers. That lineup is dead in the playoffs. I mean, dead. So unless this team can go out and make some changes and bring in somebody that's a top line starter, I like the idea that they have the capability of actually winning this division. The truth is, if the Cubs were to go make some changes, if the Cardinals were to go make some changes and bring in some high quality talent, the problem is the Brewers could get run down. They're not a far enough lead, and they're not dynamic enough on offense, and they could get run down and actually not win this division either. So that's my thoughts on the Brewers. I was on them last night. They fight back. They play hard. I think they like their new manager. But at the same time, I tell you that, they didn't win. They didn't cover, they got it. They couldn't stop the home run yesterday. But it's one of these spots where it's a division that's open. But I could say that about the Reds. The Reds, I think, are worse than the Cubs right now and worse than the Cardinals. But if you bring some offense onto that team, some consistent offense, right? And people aren't going to like me for saying this, but, Elly De La Cruz is one of the most overrated younger players there is right now in the game. Yes, he can get on base. When he's on base, creates havoc, steals bases and all that stuff. But he needs to get there, and he doesn't get there. He does hit home runs, but he doesn't hit 30, 40, 50 home runs. He's not Aaron Judge. So I think, but he's got time to grow. He's got time to become a complete player. So what I'm trying to say is that the Reds don't have a guy that drives the bus for the Reds. But if they were to go get 1 or 2, that offense becomes more dynamic. And then all of a sudden, the Greens and Lodolos can stabilize that pitching. And then all of a sudden, they're going to start winning games and surpass a lot of teams. The Pirates have pitching, but they don't have offense. So this is one of those spots where the Brewers are where they should be. They're a good team. But at the same time, I tell you that I think that they're vulnerable because they don't have the starting pitching that's needed to make it deep into the playoffs. Just getting there would be a good thing for that team at the current look that they have, unless they go out and find some pitching somewhere. But pitching is going to be things a lot of teams look at, especially in the National League, because when you look at the wild card standings, there's not very many teams that aren't in it. So it depends on kind of what you want, right? The White Sox have a great pitcher over there, Crochet. He's available. Or could be available, but you got to give up a lot to get him. So it's just a matter of, kind of what you're looking at and where you're going and what the team kind of has in play there. But so anyway, that's today's show. I gave out 3 plays. We talked a little bit about what experience means and value of experience. We talked about what is it kind of a good spot in terms of lines and numbers, and if you're a guy that goes out and bets the plus 200s, and you got to do it every time, that kind of thing. We talked about some of the steam spots that were out there and whether to follow them or where not to. So as we go along, look, I like engagement. So, a guy asked me some questions on Twitter. That was great. I do this live. So if you want to, I can break down games live, can answer questions live. So we can talk about it and we can go from there, but we're gaining traction. We got a pretty good following going every day, but the next show will be tomorrow's Saturday. I'll be on at noon tomorrow so that we can, capitalize on some of the games that we have for tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So until then, good luck tonight. I hope everybody wins, and we'll go from there. So have a great day, and time for me to go get some pizza.